County Borough Council today, 20th of October 2021. And quickly go through the protocols so we know where we are. We start the meeting. Can I welcome all members and officers to the meeting of the Council, which due to government advice and to practice social distancing, this meeting will be held virtually. The meeting has been recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as practicable following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing the meeting from remote locations. Please can everybody ensure their mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch the cameras on at that point. I would ask that, with the exception of myself as Mayor, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help minimise any background noise and interference and ensure connections remain stable as possible. If any members or officers wish to raise a point or question, they should use the hands up icon on the screen. I will come to you in order to receive request. Please don't use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. Please also do not use the chat function, as on Teams we cannot clear any text on the meeting recording. And the chat function will be enabled today, but it's purely to record people joining the meeting and leaving the meeting, as per the email received from Mark Alvin recently. In the event the Council requires to vote on any items of business before it at the meeting, the monitoring officer will call out the name of each member present in turn and request them to vote verbally, either for, against, or abstain. And then ask the monitoring officer to announce the result of the vote and the Council's decision on the item. Officers from Democratic Services and ICT will be supporting the meeting and be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. Before we formally commence, in due course, I will ask the officer from Democratic Services to announce the names of Council's attendants at this meeting, and also ask officers to introduce themselves as and when invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off and not in use. But prior to asking for apologies and prior to formally starting the meeting on item 1, we first need to pay respects to our dear colleague, Councillor Pwlb, who sadly passed away last week. A dear friend, colleague, comrade, and fellow councillor. There'll be many tributes. I expect people will wish to say and speak and say. Personally, myself, words can't say enough, and thoughts with his family at this terrible time. And in addition to that, we also have the tragic circumstances surrounding the death of Sir David Amess MP. So prior to actually starting the meeting, I would like to say that pay our respects with a 2-minute silence, and if all members could switch off their microphones and cameras, and I will call you back in after the 2-minute silence. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Members, officers, thank you for respect. Leader, would you wish to say a few words?
Yes, I would like to, please, if I can, Mr. Mayor. Phil was very passionate about people, his community, and his beliefs long before he became a member of this authority in 2008. Indeed, he earned a place in the industrial history and folklore of our nation when he played a crucial role as one of the leading coal miners in the buyout and reopening of the Tower Deep mine, becoming the first colliery in British history to be owned and run by its own workers. It was run successfully and profitably until all the coal reserves were fully mined. I won't forget how when the UK government was conducting their 2006 energy review, he sat alongside the famous Tyrone O'Sullivan and another one of his colleagues, the NUM Secretary Wayne Thomas, to address the Select Committee on Welsh Affairs at the House of Commons. Phil was not backward in coming forward when he believed in an issue, and he certainly made his views known on that occasion. It was shortly after this that he stood for election and became one of the representatives of the community of Caira and Nantyffellon. Councillor White's qualities quickly saw him appointed to the position of Cabinet Member for Communities. He continued to serve as a Cabinet Member throughout the majority of the 13 years he served as a councillor. And until he retired from the role last year, he was most recently our Cabinet Member for Social Services and Early Help. Among the many responsibilities that he fulfilled, Councillor White was an enthusiastic and very active council champion for both older people and for children and young people. This included chairing our corporate parenting committee and becoming a very passionate vice chair of our fostering panel. He was a keen mental health advocate and proud to represent us on Bridgen Care and the Welsh Local Government Association, amongst many organisations he represented us on. At Nantyffellon Primary, he was chair of governors, and the school described him in their tribute to him as a hugely loyal and supportive friend to staff and pupils, a dedicated and valued member of the Nantyffellon family, and will be a huge loss to our school community. Councillor White offered tireless service, and I know only too well that he did so while battling with significant and major health problems of his own. Despite this, he never once allowed it to prevent him from carrying out his responsibilities and duties, and his dedication proved to be an inspiration for many of us. In the days since his passing was announced, we have been inundated with messages of condolences and tributes from a wide range of partners, as well as individuals across all political parties. They have all made it very clear that Phil was a respected and well-liked elected representative and a gentleman. I won't quote any individuals, but to give you an idea of the regard in which he was held, the Welsh Local Government Association commented that Phil was a great character, larger than life, with great humour. He was hugely supportive of us, and he will be missed by his many friends. Similarly, the Cwm Taf Regional Partnership Board summed up the thoughts of many when they said that Phil was passionate about supporting people. He worked tirelessly to make a huge difference by representing, empowering, and standing up for his community. Serving alongside Phil was a real pleasure and a privilege. He always offered fantastic support to his colleagues, especially our staff and workers, served the people of the county borough to the best of his abilities, and will be greatly missed by all who knew and worked alongside him. He will, of course, most of all, be most deeply missed as a loving and loved husband, son, father, and grandfather. With the flag outside the civic offices in Angel Street flying at half-mast to mark the passing of one of our own members, all that remains for me to say is that on behalf of us all, we offer our heartfelt condolences to Phil's devastated family and friends, and especially to his widow Irene, his mother, his children, and his grandchildren. Rest in peace, Phil. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader, for those words. And if we can now go to Deputy Leader, Councillor Howell Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I haven't known Phil for a very long time. It's just for 13 years since he became a councillor in 2008. But in that time, he's made a big impact on me. You know, I'm proud to say that I can call Phil a personal friend and colleague. He was certainly a glass half full person. He was a master of one-line quips. I was just proud and felt very privileged to be able to work alongside Phil. He was a wise, caring and considerate colleague, very capable in any situation. And I'll never be able to order a Chinese meal again without thinking of Phil, but we'll need to have a couple of drinks before I can finish that story off. No, rest in peace, Phil. You've been a great friend, great colleague.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. And we got a few people like pay tribute, so we can go first to some of his colleagues in Limby Valley. Councillor Richard Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I join everyone in council mourning the loss of Phil White, a lifelong friend and comrade to myself and to my wife Margaret. And my wife Margaret would have known him all her life. They walked to school when the Catholic infant school was still in Ewenny Road, Maesteg, where she would walk daily to and from school with Phil and his sister Susan. We mourn his passing and we will miss him dearly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. Next, Councillor Gareth Howells next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I can only echo the comments of colleagues and say how saddened I am at the death of our colleague and friend Phil. And I'd like to extend my sincere condolences to Irene and the family. I've known Phil for over 50 years. We were the same age, and I used to remember playing as a teenager football against him up in Maesteg Welfare Park. There we were on different youth club teams, and then Phil, a colleague reminded me that Phil had been a very effective wing forward for Maesteg Harlequins. As a lifelong trade unionist myself, Phil made a tremendous contribution to the trade union and labour movement, and as has been said, particularly his key role in the Tower Colliery initiative. Outside his work commitments and his political involvement, of course, Phil was immensely proud of his Irish heritage and was always talking about his Irish family and background. And of course, colleagues will also know about his love of learning and playing the ukulele. And I think we've all seen that very poignant video of him playing on social media. And I used to tease Phil because he said when he finished in the cabinet, he was going to devote this time to play the ukulele. And I always used to tease him. He was likely to end up being the George Formby of Nantafellon. And I never forget his face when I lent him a book with the ukulele fake book with 500 songs in for him to learn. And his face was a picture. He said, I don't know how I'm going to get round to learn these. Well, I said, Phil, it'll take you time. I said, it'll be worth it. Phil's contribution to the communities in the Llynfi Valley, to the County Borough of Bridgend, and the wider South Wales coal mining community were immense, and they cannot be underestimated. Rest in peace, Phil. Cwsg mewn hedd, Phil. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Gareth. We're going to do it with his cabinet colleagues, former cabinet colleague. First, Councillor Charles Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I knew of Phil White long before I ever met him.
I first heard of Phil White during the 1985 miners' strike. Fast forward to the 1990s, and Phil White was famous in my eyes as one of the leaders of the Tower Colliery Cooperative. Today, I regard it as an honour and a privilege to have known Phil White, to be able to think of him as a friend, and to have sat next to him as a colleague in the BCBC cabinet room. He was a very knowledgeable man. We shared a love of Spain and an interest in the Spanish Civil War. And we were both very pleased to continue our European membership with our Irish and Spanish passports, respectively. To use two words that mean a lot among Labour Party colleagues and trade union colleagues, he was a comrade and he was a brother. He was a great human being, wise and down to earth. He loved his family and he was funny. I walked with him a couple of times between the Wilco car park in Maesteg and the town hall, and it was difficult to make forward progress. We always arrived late because every single person would want to speak to Phil, and Phil knew every man, woman, child and dog by name. I can't believe he's gone. Love and condolences to his family.
Thank you, Charles. Councillor Richard Young, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to speak about someone that was a friend and colleague and a man that I regarded as the epitome of a local councillor. He worked tirelessly for his ward, but even before being elected, he worked tirelessly for the people he worked with and the community that he lived in through his work in the NUM during probably the most desperate time the mining community had faced for over 100 years. Mr. Mayor, I was a member of the old Sogat Print Union. The General Secretary at that time was a man called Bill Keys, and he once told me in a conversation that the greatest privilege anyone could have was to represent their class. Now, he could have been talking about Phil White because that's how Phil lived his life. My experience of Phil was of someone who had respect for everyone's viewpoint, even if he didn't agree with it. And I would suggest that we do need respect in politics now more than ever. I thank Phil for his friendship and all the support and valuable advice he gave me through the years. And I also thank him for his sense of humour, which never waned even though he had some serious health issues. It was a privilege serving with Phil in the cabinet. And Mr. Mayor, I believe this world has been diminished by Phil's passing. My thoughts and those of my wife Annette are with Irene, and we hope she can find some solace at this difficult time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, once again for this opportunity to speak about Phil, a man I regard as a deep friend.
Thank you. Councillor Aldaf Hussain next, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I knew Phil when I joined the council. He was very respectful, great colleague, and very affectionate. So much so that he became my mentor. My family joins me in offering our condolences to his family, to his relations and friends. May God give them strength and patience to bear this loss. We will miss him, and may God bless him wherever he is. Thank you.
You want to. Next, Councillor Alex Williams next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of the Independence Alliance Group, I would like to echo what colleagues have said and convey my heartfelt condolences and those of all Independence Alliance Group members to Mrs. White and her family, to the Labour Group who have lost a comrade in Phil, and would just like to say that during the very short time I've known him personally since I was elected in 2017, he was always the perfect gentleman to me, and more importantly to my mother, as he always inquired after her welfare as she continues to live with her own healthcare challenges. For that, I will forever be thankful. And while Phil and I may have clashed in council meetings from time to time, as you would all have expected, politics is now, of course, set aside at a time like this. And I'm very sorry that we have lost a colleague in such sad circumstances. My and my group's heartfelt condolences go to Irene and her family. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Alex. We have Councillor Matthew Boycey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think so many other members that know Phil much better than myself have said everything that I want to say. Obviously, in council, we had a few issues of different beliefs, but outside of council, whenever speaking to him, he was a perfect gentleman, and I just wish I'd known him better. And I just like to pass on behalf of myself and the rest of the group, the Conservative group, our condolences to family, friends, and colleagues. May he rest in peace and just be a memory that we won't forget. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. There's quite a few hands to show, and I'm not sure if there's quite a few legacy hands, but Councillor Gary Thomas, next, please. Councillor Gary Thomas. Oh, okay, in a minute. Can we go to Councillor Paul Davis first, then, please? Oh, hang on, Councillor Gary Thomas. Sorry, come back.
Yeah, it's very sad sitting here and think about. He was a dear friend of mine. He used to be in the club and the Climby Club and down the Catholic Club, and you just don't realise how life is taken away from you. You know, it breaks people's hearts, and you know, it's awful. But what can one do, isn't it? You know, you got to go on, but inside you're not going on, are you? You're breaking up inside. And poor Irene and the family. And I guess there's no more I can say, I guess. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. Councillor Paul Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Yeah, I knew Phil. I'm absolutely devastated, to be honest. I known Phil through his brother Sean when I was a teenager. I used to go to the house. Obviously, I didn't see him for a long time in between while I was away, and he doing his thing in Tower, you know, and all the good work they did up there. What can I say, really? He was like a father figure to me, you know, through the last election, you know, and helping me along. And if I ever needed advice, Phil was always there. I don't know where to start. He'd be a great loss to Kyra, to the people. And as Charles stole my thunder, in fact, I was going to say you couldn't go in the Spoons with Phil. You know, you know everybody in there. Every single person would know Phil in the Spoons. It was incredible. But Charles got me on that one, in fairness to him. But of late, the last few years, we've both been members of the Maesteg Ukulele Club, which Phil was an enthusiastic member of, you know. And on the video, it shows them playing, I think, down in Pwlb. I think it's out there somewhere. Only 4 or 5 weeks ago, they were on Seafront in Pwlb, you know, just entertaining people passing. And Phil is right in the thick of it, you know, giving it his all. He absolutely loved the ukulele. But in the ukulele group, he discovered the kazoo. And he was known as the Kazoo King by his friends in the group. And they've actually put that on their eulogy on the site. And but in fairness, what Phil did lack in natural ability perhaps on the ukulele, he certainly made up for enthusiasm, Chair. And my heart goes out to Irene. I have spoke to her today. I've delivered cards up there again for everybody, people, different groups. The groups have all asked me to deliver cards. Credit Development Trust, ukulele, the Labour group. I've delivered cards for all, you know, on behalf of those people. And I just say rest in peace, Phil. And I'm get there. I can't say no more. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. I think the only one is Councillor Radcliffe. There's lots of people that still have legacy hands left up, I'm assuming, unless they want to speak again. Councillor Radcliffe.
Yes, hello. I just wanted to also pass on my condolences to Phil's family and the Labour group on behalf of all the Plaid Cymru group here, and echo the sentiments that have already been said. I didn't really know Phil that well, but I do remember the kindness within which he spoke to me when I first became a councillor, and I think the sentiments that have been expressed here are a measure of the man. So our condolences. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you, members. There's still members showing. Councillor Collins, do you wish to speak? No. Councillor Gareth Howells, Councillor Matthew Boyce and Councillor Williams, you have raised your hands. I'm just wondering if that's from previously. Okay.
I think my hand is down. Sorry, Mayor.
It's the okay. Right. I take there's no further members at this point wish to say any words. We shall now. There's many wonderful words spoken, dear colleague. And we now formally start the meeting. Before we go to that, we'll ask Michael to announce those members present at the meeting today. Michael, over to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members in attendance today are Councillor Amanda Williams, Councillor Anil Pachella, Councillor Charles Smith, Councillor Cheryl Green, Councillor David Lewis, Councillor David White, Councillor Denisha Patel, Councillor Elaine Venables, Councillor Gareth Howells, Councillor Gary Thomas, Councillor Hugh David, Councillor Howell Williams, Councillor Jane Gebby, Councillor Janice Lewis, Councillor John McCarthy, Councillor John Spanswick, yourself, Mayor, as chairperson, Councillor John Paul Blundell, Councillor Julia Williams, Councillor Kay Rowlands, Councillor Ken Watts, Councillor Lynn Walters, Councillor Martin Jones, Councillor Mary Hughes, Councillor Matthew Voisey, Councillor Mike Clark, Councillor Mike Kern, Councillor Nicole Burnett, Councillor Noah Clark, Councillor Paul Davis, Councillor Richard Granville, Councillor Rod Shaw, Councillor Rod Sturman, Councillor Sean Aspey, Councillor Steve Smith, Councillor Stuart Baldwin, Councillor Tom Beadle, Councillor Richard Young, Councillor Altaf Hussain, Councillor Alex Williams, Councillor Richard Collins, Councillor James Radcliffe, and Councillor Tim Thomas. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mike, for that. So we'll now move to item 1, apologies for absence. Received apologies from Councillor Malcolm James and also Councillor Keith Edwards. And I think Councillor Ross Pennant-Thomas may be joining late, and Councillor Pam Davis may be joining late, and Councillor Charles Smith will be leaving later in the meeting around 4 o'clock-ish. Are there any other members? Any apologies? Right, hang on then. Councillor Young, Richard Young. No. Hand is up.
I'm here.
Yeah, do you have any apologies? Your hand is showing. No, gone
No,
now.
I'm sorry. I thought I'd reduced.
Right, Councillor Hussain? No?
No, sir. I'm sorry.
Right, you just took your hand up. Right, Councillor Collins? I think there may be a few legacy hands left on my screen, and that's...
Yeah.
So, Mayor, I took my legacy hand down some time back. Thank you.
I think my screen is slow catching up. Councillor Gareth Howells?
No, there shouldn't be no legacy hand down. It's not showing on mine, Chair.
I don't know what's happening with the IT. Your hand is moving. As soon as you speak, your hand then disappears. That's happened.
Mr. Mayor, your first hand, I think, is Kay Rowlands, Councillor Kay Rowlands. The other ones, we seem to be having a bit of a hands-up problem.
Yeah, they're not going down until somebody speaks. Councillor Kay Rowlands?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies from Councillor Tom Gifford, please.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Alex Williams?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I believe Councillor Sorrel Dendy is having some connectivity issues, and Councillor Carolyn Webster may be joining a little late. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Nicole Burnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm apologies, but I'm going to need to leave the meeting at 4:30 for a personal appointment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor David White?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to leave the meeting just before 5 o'clock. I have to attend school governance training.
Okay. Councillor John Paul Blundell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to give the apologies of Councillor Brady Sedgbeer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lynn Walters.
Apologies, Mr. Mayor, but I'm going to need to leave at about 5 o'clock on a personal appointment.
Okay. Right, I think that's everybody covered. Any further apologies from anybody? Any officers? Councillor Amanda Williams.
Hi, apologies. I need to leave at 4:30 as well. Thanks.
Thank you. I've still got 5 hands showing, but this is the IT is playing up. It looks like I've now got 3 showing. I've got Councillor Voicey, Councillor Radcliffe, and Councillor Rowlands. I take it they're legacy hands, or on my screen they're still showing anyway. So I don't know if IT can do anything with that, but that's.
Right, Mr. Mayor, my hand's down. I think you've got a lag in your system.
It is extreme lag.
Yep, same here.
Councillor David White, your hand is still showing. Or you?
It says on my computer, I've lowered it.
Right, it's gone now. Gone now. Right, okay. Right, we'll get over the little blip. I think like it's definitely a bit of a satellite delay. My system or my PC. Right, item 2 then. Members receive declarations of interest, personal and prejudicial, from members or officers in accordance with the provisions of the Members' Code of Conduct adopted by Council from 1st of September 2008. Councillor Howell Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I need to declare an interest in agenda item number 8, the capital programme update. I'm Chair of Governors for Abercerdine Primary School, which is mentioned in the report, but it's a personal declaration.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Amanda Williams.
No, I've taken my hand down. It's don't know why it's going.
Okay, Councillor Nicole Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I need to declare a personal interest in agenda item number 8 as an LEA Governor for Bryntaig Comprehensive School. I also need to declare a prejudicial interest in the matter as a close family member is involved with an organisation that could benefit. So I will be removing myself from the meeting during that while that's being discussed.
Thank you. Councillor Amanda Williams, your hand is come back. Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, I do need to also declare that I am an LEA Governor for Bryntaig Comprehensive School.
Okay, thank you. Right. Nothing further to declare there. Right. Item 3 then is the approval of minutes from the council held on the 15th of September. Can I have a mover and seconder, please, of the minutes?
Move, Chair.
Seconded, yep. Councillor Venables.
Yeah, it said that I was absent and I'd given my apologies, but actually I was at the meeting last time. So if that could just be amended.
Amended. Okay, thank you. Please, if that can be done. Councillor Williams, hand is still showing. Is that my system?
It's not shown on my system.
Yeah, it's my system. So, for some reason, I don't know what's going on with it. As soon as the person speaks, the hand disappears. That's going to be a bit of a pain, but we'll deal with it. Right, so the minute's been approved and seconded. All okay with that? And with the amendment, Councillor Venables?
Aye.
Silence is good. Okay. Item 4 next then, receive announcements. First myself, and I'd like to start off my announcements today to Council by first of all making a personal statement as follows. It seems a recent comment I made in conversation with someone while using my own personal Facebook account has offended some members of the opposition, as it's been copied and pasted by them across various pages on social media, along with calls for me to resign. For the sake of clarity, my comment concerned the perceived rivalry between my role as Mayor of the County Borough of Bridgend and the role of the local Bridgend Town Mayor. Most specifically, I said that I was looking forward to winding up at a forthcoming event we were both attending, referred to him in jest as a minor mayor, and joked that his chain was probably bigger than mine. It was never meant to be a public post, as I was under the impression this was a private conversation I was having. But as soon as I realised it was open to the public, I immediately deleted the post in order not to offend or upset anyone. No harm or insult was ever intended by any of this, and I am sorry if it caused offence to any individual or organisation, as that was never my intention. So since our last council meeting, there's not been a great deal of mayoral visits, but I was pleased to be invited by Steve Brace of Pwlb Athletics to relaunch their refurbished athletic track and facilities at Newbridge Fields. There were a number of sporting stars there, including previous councillor Eric Hughes, who some of you will still remember, who is still running on a regular basis after major heart surgery and now being in his 80s. Pwlb Athletics have produced a number of regional, national, world and Olympic stars over the years, and long may this continue as they embark upon the next chapter in their development as a club. I've also been visiting recipients of the Mayor Citizenship Awards from when Councillor Baldwin was Mayor. I couldn't be presented due to the pandemic. Last week it was a pleasure to visit Isabella Evans, who at 15 years old has done some amazing work in learning sign language known as Macedon to help with her siblings and their development. She's clearly a star of the future. I was also accompanied by Councillor Baldwin and Councillor Houday with the leader as well. Them's Pencoed Comprehensive School and the Young Carers Group. It's great to learn the support they're getting from the school and hearing some of their stories as to how they help and support their parents and siblings prior to school and after school. Made me realise how remarkable these young adults are, who will surely grow into even more remarkable adults in the future. And lastly, I was on to Kenfig Rugby Club to present an award to Chris Lyshon, who's doing some amazing work in raising vital funds and awareness of prostate cancer. It's the most common form of cancer in men in the UK, with 1 in 8 being affected, and this increases to 1 in 3 if there's a family history of prostate cancer. There's no automatic screening of men in this country, and therefore I recommend that all men over 50, or anybody with a concern or family history, log on to the Prostate Cymru website, where there's a simple checklist to complete and advise you whether to go and visit your doctor to request a PSA blood test. The next round of Mayor's Annual Citizenship Awards will soon be launched, and nominations will be invited from Monday the 8th of November. The awards will be open to all people who live in the county borough, as well as groups and businesses based locally. More information will be on the BCBC website, where a nomination form can be downloaded, and members will also receive an email with all the relevant information in due course. The deadline for receipt of these nominations will be Friday the 7th of January 2022, and the winners will be announced in March 2022. I will be hosting a Mayor's pre-Christmas charity event on Saturday 27th of November at the Heronston Hotel and Spa, with a comedy stage hypnotist and music by Lee Jukes of Bridge FM. Tickets £22.50 a bargain and include a buffet meal and a guaranteed laugh a minute. Tickets are selling fast, as Councillor Gary Thomas always used to say. Please don't leave it too late to get to us. And the event is open to all, and it'd be great to see as many councillors as possible, along with partners, family and friends. And in addition to this, I'm in the process of arranging a Christmas prize draw raffle. Tickets will soon be on sale at £2 each, with the first prize of £200 cash. I'm looking then to draw the winning ticket on Wednesday the 15th of December, just after our council meeting for that month. And I've received great support with raffle prizes from a number of Pwlb town traders and Sony of Pencoed and Asda from Pwlb. So your support for the above will be greatly appreciated, as there's no longer a charity committee or officer assistance in arranging any mayoral fundraising activities, which I'm trying to raise funds for lads and dads and Pwlb Carer Centre. And therefore, I just hope these events will be successful, as my wife and I have put a lot of work to date in arranging them, and will continue to do so for the remainder of our term as Mayor and Mayoress of the County Borough of Pwlb. That's it from me today. We'll now move to members of the Cabinet, but I'm not sure if there are any announcements from members of the Cabinet. No, I don't think there is. If not, we move to the Chief Executive.
No, Mr. Mayor, no announcements today from me.
Thank you, Mark. So we'll go on to item 5 then, to announcements of the leader. Won't you, Leader?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We were all shocked last week by the killing of a dedicated member of Parliament when he was simply holding an advice surgery. In an act of terror, Sir David Amess MP was stabbed to death in a church in his own constituency of Southend West when he was just doing his duty as an elected representative, something we all do day in, day out. In the aftermath, very moving tributes were made to Sir David and his contribution to Parliament and the way he championed Southend. Sadly, we also heard in that session of Parliament how commonplace abuse of our MPs has become, with all having received abuse, attacks and threats, and many having received death threats. Parliamentarians from across the chamber reminded us that we have in common matters far more. We must cherish those bonds and shared values. A point was made consistently that whatever political differences we have, we are all here for the same reason, to try and do what we think is best for the people who we represent. I was thinking of this this time about the MP for the Rhondda who'd received a death threat on the weekend from a member of the public. It was especially sobering to learn that an arrest of a man was subsequently made here in Bridgend County Borough. To learn anything from these tragic events, it must surely be the need for a greater focus on mutual respect. The simple ability to be able to discuss and disagree without having to destroy or attack individuals or resort to the deliberate, harmful spread of disinformation. I'm not interested in that type of politics, and I'm sure you all agree that there needs to be far greater focus on mutual respect. Respect for one another as political colleagues, respect for one another as human beings, and respect for all of our democratically elected representatives, regardless of what party they may or may not belong to. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. So that now takes us to item 6 of today's agenda, the report of the Chief Executive, the annual report 2020-21. Can I first, or Jill do this, ask for a mover and a seconder first?
Move.
Seconder.
Second.
Take the report then. Jill, take the report, yeah? Yeah.
Yes, I
Yep.
am.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And for the purposes of the recording, my name's Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. What you have in front of you here today is the annual report for 2021 that's shown at Appendix A for Council to consider and approve. And I think I want to say at this point that there probably hasn't been quite a year as 2021. And so it's remarkable in many respects that we've got such an exciting annual report in front of us today, which highlights, I think, some of the real achievements of the council during, I think we've used the word so many times, but an unprecedented year. So just a little bit of background. The requirement for us to produce an annual report, the Shared Purpose, Shared Future statutory guidance in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, asks public bodies to make sure that they produce an individual annual review on the progress against the wellbeing objectives and to publish the report on how we contribute to the 7 wellbeing goals. We need to publish this report under the measure by October the 31st, and that's what you have in front of you today. The corporate plan, which is what we look at when we're writing the annual report, was agreed in March 2020. And who would have known in March 2020, I think, what the year would bring for us all. This corporate plan was revised because of the pandemic and further approved by you as council on September the 20th in September 2020. And that review was very thorough. And as you will recall, some targets were removed from the corporate plan to allow staff, quite rightly, to focus on the emergent and the emergency and urgent issues that we were all facing. So I think the COVID pandemic created unprecedented challenges. It had quite a dramatic effect on the way that we did business as a council, and I know you'll all be familiar with some of those challenges and the changes that we had to make. But I think council has done this through a number of means: enhanced collaboration, certainly with many of our partners. There was some fantastic working in collaboration, partnership working, certainly with the third sector and stakeholders. And I should mention our committed, adaptable and resilient staff and members in all this. And as we speak, we're now planning the recovery from the pandemic and embracing many of the new ways of working and delivering services that we've experienced throughout the last year and a half. So despite the difficulties of the year in question, there've been some fantastic achievements, some in regeneration, homelessness, managing the vulnerable, education, sustainability. I could go on and mention so many of them. So we are expected to measure our commitments in our annual report. And of the 32 commitments that we made to support the delivery of our wellbeing objectives, 13 were fully completed and 19 achieved most of their milestones. So not a bad effort considering all the challenges that were faced. And of the 46 indicators, 14 were within 10% of the target, with 11 missing their target by a little bit more. And all the detail on those is in Appendix A. But there are quite strict rules in terms of missing the target. So even if the target was 13 and 2 were missed, then that would mean that we missed the target. So we're quite hard on ourselves, I think, in terms of our targets. So it's an important document for council. It's particularly important as this was a unique and unprecedented year. It provides citizens and stakeholders with detailed information, and I think you'll agree there's a fair amount of information in the report. And it gives a lot of detail about the council's performance against the wellbeing objectives and outcomes. But it's also quite a celebration of success, I think, as we look at many of the examples in the report itself. So it's a good read. I'd commend it to anyone who was interested in the council's performance. I wasn't going to go into any detail. The report is in front of you and you've all had an opportunity to look at it. And myself and colleagues are here, obviously, to take any questions that anyone might have. So I'll take you to the recommendations, Mr. Mayor, at 9.1. I think you're on mute.
That's better. Put my mic. Yep. That's right. It's been moved and seconded. Do any members have any questions, queries? Councillor David, leader.
I wanted to once again. I did it yesterday, but obviously most members weren't present at Cabinet, so I'll make the point again today that we are all, I'm sure, very grateful to the staff who have once again gone above and beyond the call of duty in responding to the circumstances, the unprecedented circumstances and pressures we face, and those pressures have not gone away, and it is still very difficult, and there is not a department of this council, this authority, that has not in some way had to respond to the pandemic and have gone out of their way to respond and deliver the best services they can to the people of Bridgend. Whether that is finance, getting £40 million worth of grants out in record time, whether it's our homeless support people helping record numbers of homeless people, or whether it's our schools turning into childcare hubs overnight and then providing online virtual learning at very short notice, and of course social care that has never stopped, and in fact we're experiencing record growth there too. The report reflects that progress, but it also is an honest report that reflects on where we haven't achieved what we would have liked to have achieved. But where that is the case, there's an explanation of that. And of course, we will look to build on that this year. We're always looking to seek to make further improvements, and I'm sure colleagues, particularly colleagues in the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, will help us in shaping those targets and making sure that we have a spotlight on them going forward. Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Venables.
No, I don't have anything. That must have been.
Okay, hands it's gone now. Councillor Alex Williams.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to echo what Councillor David said and thank Jill for her report. As she said, it's been an unprecedented year, and I'd like to extend my thanks as well to all of the local authorities staff who have performed outstandingly well given very significant pressures. One question that I might have for Jill, if I may, is how do we compare against other local authorities of the same kind? I think it's important, while measuring our performance against our national wellbeing objectives, that we also look at how we're performing against other local authorities in Wales of a similar kind. So can you outline perhaps how well we're doing? I know we're doing particularly well, for example, when it comes to recycling. That's one example. But are there any other areas where perhaps we're not doing quite as well, where we might look to divert additional resources to ensure that we perform better in those areas? Thanks.
Over to you, Jill.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Williams, and it's a very good question, and it's a rather complicated answer, I think. For the last 2 years, I guess it would be no surprise that many of the national indicators were suspended in terms of collection for obvious reasons. We've recently been notified that what we call the PAMs, that you will be familiar with, will now be collected retrospectively, but to inform future service delivery rather than necessarily as a comparison. So we are slightly hampered, obviously, and everybody, to be fair, each council handled the pandemic in similar ways, but different depending on their challenges. So it's quite understandable. You will also be aware that some of the education indicators are not collected for comparison and published. And therefore, it is quite difficult to get really, really good comparisons on a like-for-like basis. So where we have national indicators and we contribute, then obviously we look at where we are The data unit produces, probably not the right word, but a table of comparators, and we always look to see where the council is in terms of comparative similar councils. But just to reassure you, I guess, whenever we look at any service in any detail, and I'm sure my colleagues can come in on this should they wish, the first port of call is what are others doing? It's not just about the indicators, it's also about the process. Is there anything we can learn? And anybody that's heard perhaps the conversations that go on at CMB will be about, can we learn from elsewhere? Is anybody doing it better, and can we perhaps learn from others? And so you will see from many of our partnerships that we do look to other councils. Indeed, other councils sometimes look to Bridgend to learn things as well. So I think it's a very complicated answer. I'm not avoiding the issue at all. In fact, we're very, very keen to compare and contrast and learn. But the last 2 years has given us just a little bit more difficulty in getting really good comparators. So sorry, that's a bit long-winded, Mr. Mayor, but hopefully that's helped.
Thank you, Jill. Councillor Williams, okay with that? Yeah.
Yes, thanks, great.
Okay, there's no further indications for anybody wish to ask any questions. So that's been moved and seconded. I take we're all in favour of the report.
All in favour?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So we'll now move to item 7 on the agenda. Treasury Management half-yearly report. I think it's back to Jill. Yep, over to you, Jill.
It certainly is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So for the purposes of the recording, Jill Lewis, the Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. So the purpose of the report that you have in front of you is obviously to comply with regulations, the Public Services Code of Practice on Treasury Management, and to approve the Council's Treasury Management activities for the period 1st of April to the 30th of September, and also the projected Treasury Management indicators for 21-22. So this is an update on the strategy that was approved by Council on the 24th of February 2021 in line with the requirements. Appendix A provides the detail of the position on our Treasury Management activities, but I'll just, if I may, just set out a few key points for Council today. As you will appreciate, the Council has had surplus funds for investment during the first 6 months of this year. You will know from my presentation on the outturn that we had additional grants received towards the end of 2021, and we've continued to be successful in obtaining money from the hardship fund and also additional grants, particularly in areas like social care to help with the recovery. So we have had surplus funds that's enabled us to invest and has enabled us to finance, obviously, internal borrowing for our capital programme. As at the 31st of December, the Council's long-term debt position remained constant. It's at about 97 million. Any other long-term liabilities are primarily the private finance initiative, which was used to provide the Maesteg Secondary School. The investments totalled about 80 million, with an average interest rate, interestingly, of 0.06%, which is a really significant fall from the same time last year, where the average rate was 0.24%. Still not fantastic, but very understandable with the current financial climate. The average rates of return have significantly fallen because of the fall in the bank base rate, and we anticipated that. So we don't really achieve a huge amount anymore from our investments, sadly. The local authorities and the money market funds remain our two primary investment vehicles. At present, all our local authority investments are 12 months or less, and our money market funds are instant access. At the 30th of September, we had about 29 million with local authorities, 24 million with the money market funds, and investments with the DMO and the banks was about 28 million. So a fairly good spread across those. You'll remember that the council has to set aside resources to repay debt in the future, known as the minimum revenue provision. And as the council has available reserves, as I've alluded to before, we're maintaining an under-borrowed position. So we haven't had to borrow as a council since 2012, which is extremely good news. The primary objective of the council's borrowing strategy is obviously to ensure long-term debt is affordable. You know that I remind council and we'll move on to the capital programme shortly, but the majority of the loans that the council holds are still with the Public Works Loans Board at long-term fixed rates of interest. The one key change that I have referred to before, but it's becoming even more important, is a key change to the Pwlb borrowing for local authorities. I've referred to it before. As a condition of us being able to borrow from the Pwlb, local authorities will have to confirm that there's no intention to buy investment assets primarily for yield or investment returns in the current or the next 2 financial years, and that will be a rolling programme. So I will have to certify that we're not borrowing, so buying property purely for yield is no longer possible. And it doesn't matter how you carve up the capital programme, even if it's from a capital receipt, that would still prevent you from borrowing. The code consultation is coming to an end, and I understand it's going to be even tougher than they set out previously. So we will have to be mindful of that when we look at our capital programme. The council also holds nearly 20 million of the lender's option, borrower's option, the LOBOs that I've talked about before, to review dates in the year where the lender may exercise their option. The interest rates are 4.65%, and I guess it will be no surprise to council that the lender hasn't exercised the option to review those. And we don't anticipate that happening, but nevertheless, there is that option every 6 months. The investment strategy and profile is set out in section 4 of Appendix A, and you will also have heard me say before that we still operate on the basis of security first, then liquidity, and then yield. And it's only at the ends that we would look at yield. We have to make sure that we have safe investments. So that was all I wanted to draw your attention to today as council. Happy to take any questions. I'll take you to the recommendations at 9.1, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Jill. Can I first
Move the recommendation.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, that's the recommendation been moved and seconded. Do we have any questions, comments from councillors? All looking quiet on my screen. Nobody is indicated. No. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. So take it all in favour, and that's been approved. Thank you. Thank you, Jill, for that. And then Moving on to item 8. Back to yourself for the capital programme update Q2 report. Thank you, Jill.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Mayor, just getting the paper in place and getting the mic on. What you have in front of you here today, for the purposes of recording, it's Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. And what you have in front of you here today is the capital programme update for Q2. The Q2 revenue report went to Cabinet yesterday, as did the capital programme, but as you will recall, Council need to agree the capital programme update. So the purpose of the report today is obviously to comply with the regulations as set out in the first bullet point of 1.1, to provide an update on the capital position for 21-22 as at 30th of September. That's set out in Appendix A. To seek approval for a revised capital programme for 2021-22 to 2030-31, because it's a 10-year capital programme. That's set out in Appendix B. And to note the projected prudential and other indicators for 21-22, and those are set out in Appendix C. So on the 24th of February 21, the Council approved a capital budget of just over 62 million for 21-22 as part of that 10-year capital programme from 21-22 to 30-31. The report in front of you today shows the revised programme, the capital strategy monitoring and the prudential and other indicators. At paragraph 4.2, you will see the Q2 update, and the revised programme for 21-22 currently totals 76.6 million, 54 million from BCBC resources and 22 million external resources. And you'll see that set out in Table 2. Table 1 shows the position by directorate, and you'll see that the bulk of the capital programme is in education and family support and communities, as you might expect. Table 2 shows the funding assumptions, and as I referred to at the start, Appendix A gives all the detail of each of the individual schemes. So a number of schemes have already been identified as requiring slippage to 22, 23 or even later. The detail of those is set out in 4.4 and they total 12.8 million. The main ones where there's slippage are the City Deal, Children's Residential Hub, community play areas, and the Bridgend Heat and the Kyra Heat network. You'll see from 4.5 onwards details of new externally and internally funded schemes, and there's some really exciting and ambitious schemes here in the programme, which are in front of Council today for approval. So just to mention a few, the active travel and safety road improvements, the Bridgend College relocation, Abercardine Primary, Community Hub and Brinteg comprehensive multi-use games facilities, the Health and Wellbeing Village, some further work to enhance Maesteg Town Hall, and an extremely exciting programme of CCTV and Wi-Fi CCTV has already been approved by council, but this is linking it to the Wi-Fi project to boost the existing network throughout Bridgend to make it a smart borough. 4.8 to 4.10 sets out the detail on the prudential and other indicators, and obviously those are set out, as I said earlier, in Appendix C. And thankfully that shows that the council is operating within approved limits. 4.11 and 4.12 details the non-treasury management investments and other long-term liabilities. So that was all I was proposing to say. Obviously, there's a lot of detail on the schemes in the report. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I take you to the recommendations at 9.1.
Thank you, Jill. The recommendations, we have Appendix A, B and C. Do I have a mover and seconder for recommendations as before us?
Move the report.
Second.
Second, okay, thank you. Members? Any burning questions? There's nobody indicating? No, right, there's nobody indicating. I take we're all in favour of that report and that's approved.
Right.
Yep, okay, thank you. So item 9 next then, and that's report of the Chief Officer Legal and Regulatory on the market supplement policy. I think Mark, you're taking this. Yeah, over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and for the benefit of the tape, I'm Mark Shepherd, Chief Executive. I also have present today Deb Beat, Group Manager for Human Resources and Organisational Development, in case there are any questions. I hope, though, Mr. Mayor, this is a relatively straightforward report, the purpose of which is to seek approval of the market supplement policy. In terms of the background, I think it's fairly well rehearsed that the authority has been facing some significant recruitment and retention issues throughout the organisation, but obviously pockets where that is quite acute in some parts of the organisation, and that is quite a widespread issue across organisations, public organisations and local authorities, and we did highlight to you back in March 2021 as part of the pay policy agreed that this would be potentially something we'd be looking at in terms of the introduction of market supplements in recognition of the challenges we faced in recruitment and retention in some professions on the current pay structure. And you recall that all previous market supplements ceased with the introduction of the new pay and grading structure when job evaluation and the collective agreement was introduced in September 2013. So what this report is doing is proposing the introduction of a market supplement policy which would address the issue that the Council's job evaluation scheme and grading structure does not currently take into account factors such as market pay rates or fluctuating demand for skills in the marketplace. The intention would be to essentially implement a policy that would be very similar to many other local authorities. So it's not an unusual policy, but it's something that we don't currently have. And just to emphasise the impact of not being able to fill positions, clearly that creates a number of vacancies. That obviously impacts on the authority's capacity and indeed its delivery of services, and ultimately that impacts, of course, on our customers. And so it is a really important part of what we do, and therefore what we currently have across the organisation a number of undesirable vacancies, which creates an underspend, but actually is not what we want. We want actually to fill the positions so we have the capacity to deliver services in the way that you would hope and I would hope. If I take you to section 4, the market supplement policy is set out in full at Appendix 1. In particular, you will see within there that there is a process and a pro forma. I suppose what I would want to emphasise is that it's a policy that's temporary in nature, so it temporarily increases the pay awarded to a post without altering the determined job evaluation grade. This will ensure that the principles in the job evaluation scheme in maintaining equal pay are preserved. And I just want to emphasise to you in paragraph 4.2 that it's very much a policy that we use as an exception rather than the rule. It'll be very carefully and robustly managed. That is to ensure that there is a strong evidenced business case whenever this policy is implemented. That's clearly very important, as you will recognise moving forward. Paragraph 4.3 sets out that this is a process in which the trade union representatives have been fully engaged, indeed contributed to the development of this new policy, so they are supportive, and it will require, as set out in that paragraph, an addendum to the Council's single status job evaluation collective agreement. But again, one, as I say, that is supported. I think the other thing I just want to emphasise is that this is just one tool in our armoury in terms of recruitment and retention. It's certainly not a panacea, and there are, of course, a range of other initiatives that the Council is pursuing in terms of filling its vacant posts, not least the grow your own policies around our apprentice scheme and graduate scheme, more innovative recruitment and retention schemes, and also stronger links with our employability team, where they may be able to assist and identify how they can help fill vacancies. So again, it's just one part of what we're trying to do. The final section, Mr. Mayor, I just want to draw your attention to is the financial implications. Clearly, if we do implement market supplement policy, and we do indeed use that policy to pay a market supplement to some posts, that will of course increase costs. I suppose I would just put it to you that the alternative at the moment, though, is we're finding ourselves in some cases having to often recruit actually expert external advice or consultancy, and so I would like to think as well in the longer term having such a policy will help offset some of that as well. So I think with that I don't have anything further to say, Mr. Mayor, but of course should there be any questions, either Deb or myself are happy to try and answer them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mark. And before we go to the recommendation, I note in the chat that Councillor Brian Jones connectivity issues, and he's tendered his apologies. That can be recorded as well, please. So I'll take it first to the recommendation, the market supplement policy. We're moving and seconder.
Move recommendation.
Right, and Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to speak in support of this policy. It seeks to address an issue that we've sort of had to deal with for quite some time, and that is, we've had vacancies that we've been unable to fill for whatever reason, and we hope that this will assist us in filling some of those key posts to enable some resilience in the service. I suppose that's what we're looking for, and I think there's a risk there of not filling these posts, and quite often we have to fill them with consultancy staff, which are probably more expensive long term than what this policy would seek to address. So I'm happy to support the recommendation, and I hope we'll get the support of all members.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Amanda Williams.
Hi, thanks very much. I support the report, but my one question is, how will we stop members of staff, current members of staff, leaving our authority and joining another authority if there's the potential that other authorities are doing the same thing, so they can potentially get more money? Thanks.
Jill, do you able to? Oh, sorry, Mark or anybody able to?
Yeah, I'm happy, Mr. Mayor, to try and answer. I mean, I think the honest answer is that if people find opportunities in other organisations that pays more, well, it'll always be difficult to stop them entirely. I suppose what we're introducing here is something that at least gives us something which would identify that if there are risks to the organisation, either in not being able to fill posts or indeed being able to retain people within posts, that we have a mechanism to potentially pay more based on that market condition. In terms of the wider piece, I mean, it's a bit of a zero-sum game if each authority keeps raising the stakes, and that's why, for example, in areas such as social care, I would support national terms and conditions so that you don't have individual authorities, for example, paying their social workers more, which then requires the neighbouring authority to pay more, and so on and so on. So I think you've introduced something there, Councillor Williams, which is quite a broad topic really, but in a sense, I suppose what I would argue is that this policy is one of the tools at our disposal to potentially address where we are at risk from potentially losing skilled people from a particular part of the organisation to other areas. We can potentially say, well, the market conditions dictate that we need to pay more.
Thank you, Mark. Deputy, did you want to come back on that? Your hand is showing. No. Okay. Councillor Lynn Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I definitely welcome this policy. I know that I've had discussions in the past with different people about the need to to have market rates of pay. The question I have, though, is in the policy, it's saying that the market pay increase will only be paid for 2 years. Is there a danger, first of all, that we will only retain people for a maximum of 18 months until they start looking for another role somewhere else? Or is the intention that if the market conditions continue to be as they are, that the pay rates will be reviewed within the 2 years? So that's my first question. And the second question is, how will the volume of people who are having increased pay through this policy, how will that be monitored? Is that something that will be monitored closely by CMB? Because it's needed, but it gives opportunities, but also risks to the authority. Thank you.
It's yeah. Thank you, Councillor Walters. Again, very fair questions, really, and something we considered at some length at Corporate Management Board. You'll note within the policy that there's a requirement for a business case which needs to be signed off by a member of CMB and by Finance and HR, and it will also be reported regularly to CMB where there are posts that are have this supplement. I think, therefore, we can keep a very tight control. I mean, I made the point in the presentation of the report. I do very much regard this as the exception rather than the rule, and therefore I would hope that there are relatively few positions across the organisation where this would apply. But I do recognise there are some areas where it is very much needed. In terms of the other point, I think it was important that we put a review period in, because it is very much meant to be a temporary payment, because what we don't want to do is impact on our equal pay position. But I think I'd also say that clearly, if within that 18-month review there is no difference or no change in the market conditions, or indeed if at that point perhaps the job needs to be regraded on a more permanent basis, if there are responsibilities that allow that, then there are other opportunities to either increase, allow the market supplement to apply for longer, or indeed for a different mechanism to increase the grade of that post. I think that's all in there to keep the element of control that I think you've suggested. I think if you didn't have a review, then I think you would have a problem, because potentially this could apply for an indefinite period. And my recollection, though I wasn't necessarily in the position to know all of the detail, my recollection was back before J in 2013, that was exactly what we had. We had some honoraria that had gone on for a long period of time, and of course that's what leads potentially to equal pay claims across the organisation. So we will, I can assure you, be keeping a very tight eye on it.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Amanda Williams, sorry, my apologies. Do you want to come back in from the previous question?
No, I took my hand down. I think it's your system, sorry.
System is a nightmare. Councillor Williams, your hand has gone down, come up, it's gone back down, back up. Is it my system?
I don't believe it's up at the moment.
It's my system, it's a nightmare. Councillor Paul Davies then.
Chair, just out of curiosity, does this policy apply to lorry drivers? Because apparently there's the wages outside now are so high, are they going to all be leaving us in droves to, if one of them was to put a claim in, do you think we'd be able to give them a increase to keep them on board? Or
it applies, Councillor Davies, wherever the relevant director thinks there's a necessity to apply it for it. So I don't think we're ruling anything out. What I would say is, if you look at the detail of the policy, there's quite a process to go through before you jump straight to the paying the market supplement. We would have to evidence that, for example, we have advertised and failed to recruit, or have to evidence in some way that there is a need for it. And it's back to Councillor Walters' point, really, I think, about it being tightly controlled to ensure that when it is applied, it's very much evidenced as necessary.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gareth Owens.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Mark, for your report. Can I say that I support the principle here, because unfortunately we have a rigid job valuation scheme, and the issue about market supplements is the only way you can address a system like this. And naturally there is the issue about ensuring the council does not get itself exposed to equal pay claims. So I think this is the right option. And I can probably, from a historical perspective, my background as a full-time union officer, say that this process is something that's been quite consistent in industrial relation practice for some years. And Mark mentioned social care, etc. And I can recall going back 15 years and being involved in negotiating a market supplement for care inspectorate Wales staff because of issues about difficulties in recruitment and retention there. So this is quite a common occurrence. I think the other point I would say is that, Mark made the point about having national scales for you mentioned, I think, social care and that, and there is a danger with authorities leapfrogging one another. And I really think that the authority should, through the WLGA, as a long-term approach, try and ensure there's a single job evaluation scheme across the local government sector in Wales, because that would obviate the need for going along this road, and it would stop authorities attracting people and changing grades and all that. So I personally think that this isn't a perfect solution, but I can tell you from my employment and industrial relations background, it is the only sensible approach that's currently available. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Mark, again.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wells. There's nobody else indicating wishes to speak now, so that's been moved and seconded. I take it we're all in favour of that report.
Aye.
Yep, all in silence is good. Thank you. Right, so we now move on to item 10 on the agenda. I think Jill is taking this one, yeah? Changes to membership of the Governance and Audit Committee. Over to you, Jill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the purposes of the recording, my name's Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. The purpose of the report before you today is to consider changes to the membership of the Governance and Audit Committee, which would take effect following the annual meeting of Council on the 18th of May 2022. So the authority already has, as you will know, I'm sure, a Governance and Audit Committee set up as part of the Local Government Measure 2011. It's a statutory requirement, and Bridgend have always had an Audit Committee. At 3.2, you'll see that the main functions of the Audit Committee are set out there in those 3 bullet points. The Local Government and Election Wales Act 2021, that again Council will be familiar with, has added additional responsibilities to these 3 bullet points with consideration of performance and complaints. And the Audit Committee has already been considering what that might mean for it. So the current membership of the Audit Committee is 12 local authority members and 1 lay member. The lay member was appointed in 2007, reappointed in 2017, and her second term therefore expires in May 2022. So from May 2022, the legislative requirement is that a third of the committee is represented by lay members. And this report proposes that the 12 members are represented by 8 local authority members and 4 lay members. It's proposed that Council approve its appointment of additional lay members today, and then the allocation of the 8 seats will be done in the usual political composition manner at the meeting in May. Just a description of the lay members. They should be independent, have no business connection with the Council, and shouldn't have any political allegiances that would compromise their independence. It also states that knowledge of local authority functions would be extremely helpful. The lay members cannot serve more than 2 terms of office and will also be subject to the Council's Code of Conduct. So if Council was minded to approve the proposal today, the recruitment process that's outlined in 4.6 to 4.8 of the report in front of you would then be commenced. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I take you to the recommendations at 9.1, 9.2 and 9.3.
Thank you, Jill. I'll ask members to for a mover and seconder for the recommendations as laid before.
Move the report.
Seconder. Seconded. Thank you. We've got Councillor Alex Williams. Question.
Hi, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Jill, for the report. I'm pleased that the recruitment of lay members is starting at this early stage before the legislation is enacted in May 2022. But just a quick point of clarification, if I may. Am I correct in saying that any future chair of the Audit Committee is required to be a lay member? And second of all, if that's the case, what training will be available to the lay members when they are appointed? And then second of all, you mentioned the remuneration which lay members will receive upon their appointment for the work they do for the local authority. The current chair of the Audit Committee is in receipt of a senior salary. So will the chair, if they are lay members, be in receipt of an enhanced salary compared to what has been outlined in the report? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Yes, you're correct. The chair is expected to be one of the lay members, and the remuneration is set at a daily rate at the moment, and that will be part of the Democratic Services budget. I need to come back to you on whether the chair would have an enhanced daily rate. I've seen absolutely nothing to suggest that that's the case, but I will need to come back to you, Councillor Williams, on that. All I've seen is the flat daily rate at the moment, so and a half-day rate. In terms of training, there'll be extensive training. The WLGA will be coordinating much of this recruitment in conjunction with Laura Griffiths and the Democratic Services team, and we will also be putting on training in the council. And I can see that I know that Laura is acting as the monitoring officer today, so I wasn't sure whether she was able to come in, but since she's put her hand up, I will thankfully hand over.
Over to you, Laura.
Thank you, Jill. For the purposes of the report, Laura Griffiths, Group Manager, Legal and Democratic Services. As Jill has outlined, there will be a daily rate, but I can confirm that it is an enhanced rate. And we just await further statutory guidance now in terms of the further recruitment of those lay members, the position of chair and training. So we're just waiting for that statutory guidance to be published. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, do you have any further? Okay with that?
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Jill. Right, that's been. Did have a mover second. I've lost plot. Yeah, that was moving seconded. All in favour of that report? Yep. Good. Moving on to item 11, information reports for Norton. Mark, you quickly take us to this one. Is there for Norton? Anything to add, Mark?
I could say, Mr. Mayor, I mean, we don't usually go through them. They are there for noting.
Yeah.
There are no approvals or decisions to be made, so they're just members' information.
Okay.
There may, of course, be one particular one of interest this time with regard to the electoral division boundary review, but again, there's no decisions as such. It's just for information on the future of the future boundaries.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Can I have a mover and seconder then, please, for
Note the report.
Moved, seconded.
Second, Chair.
Second.
No questions, so don't be indicating. So take it all in favour of that. Noting, thank you. So that brings us on to item 12, which is receive the following question from Councillor Altaf Hussain. Councillor Hussain, and I take it you've received a response as well?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it was very thankful to Deputy Leader for his response. And I have a supplementary question, if you may allow me.
Yeah, over to you, sir. Yep.
Thank you very much. As I said, I'm grateful to Deputy Leader for his response to my question. Now, proportionality of the LDP in BC is failing our valleys, communities, which is evident when one sees 14% or 1,360 of the 9,200 homes planned or situated in valleys on the north of Bridgend, like Ogmore and Gow. Why is our LDP process in Bridgend failing our valley communities when leveling up of the valleys, is a new political buzzword?
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. That's
thank you, sir.
Your supplementary question. Anyone want to comment on that or answer? Okay.
I'm happy to come in, though. I'm sure Janine may want to speak specifically about the LDP process, because I think essentially it's difficult to answer that without understanding how the LDP works. But if I got the gist of what Councillor Hussain was driving at, is that why are there not more opportunities for development in the valleys areas? Okay, I mean, and I'll let Janine come in and give you the full explanation in a minute. But essentially, the LDP, as you know, has to be evidence-based, and it has to be credible, and it has to get through an inspector. I think you'll have known from the briefings and from the DC committee briefings in particular as well, that it's a very robust process. It's one governed by Welsh Government as well. I think we have an ambition to realistically and credibly develop in valleys areas where we can, but there are also some limitations, both in terms of infrastructure limitations, for example at Junction 36, but also most obviously in terms of areas of land where you can create significant developments. But I think you'll find that where there are those areas of land that exist, we are very committed to trying to bring them forward. So, for example, the Iweni Road development in my steg, which is perhaps the most obvious one, but I'm sure elsewhere as well. I'm aware of one on a more limited scale in Bettus as well, Janine. But Janine, you might want to try and provide a little bit of information, and if we haven't got it all, we can come back to Councillor Hussain at another time.
Okay, before I come to Janine, it was remiss of me not to remind members that there'll be 2 supplementary questions, but I'll make members aware of the point at which to indicate if they wish to ask the question, so it's taken in appropriate time after they say, please raise your hand. Before that, though, over to you, Janine.
Oh, many thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Hussain, for your supplementary question. For the purposes of recording, I'm Janine Nightingale, and I'm the Corporate Director for Communities. Yes, Mark has outlined quite a lot of what I was going to say, Councillor Hussain. We have an LDP that we've just consulted on. And as part of the LDP process, we have to outline strategic housing sites. And they are a critical part, really, of the LDP itself, because we have to meet housing targets as identified by Welsh Government. Now, what we are mindful of is there's 2 things that really cause some issues for Bridgend in terms of housing north of the M4. And the first issue we've got is the capacity at junction 36 of the motorway, because that prevents us putting very large housing developments north of the M4. And the second one is the level crossing piece at Pencode, the Pempress Bridge piece there, that again stops major developments north of Pencode. So what we are able to do within the LDP is identify areas of land that are for strategic allocations for large volume house building, and you know that we've done that. We do have the site at Iweni Road in my stake, and that's what we're progressing, that site. It was a site that suffered from housing viability in the past, so we've had some money from Welsh Government to unlock some of the contamination on that site to bring that site forward. Now, what we are instead encouraging, instead of large volume house building in the valleys areas, we're looking at much smaller plots, smaller infill plots or smaller housing developments of less than 10 homes, because we think that's more appropriate, and also because of the moratorium on development past Pen Code at the Penprisk level crossing and the junction capacity issues at junction 36. Those are the things we can bring forward successfully. So it isn't that we're not working in those areas, because we're working tirelessly in those areas, and there's great demand as well for new homes in the valley areas. We are doing that, but what we can't do at this stage is the larger volume sites that you see in the LDP. But the smaller sites are just as an important contribution going forward. And one of the things that John Parsons, our group manager in planning, is doing is looking at the placemaking agenda, and that's very important for Welsh Government now. And in particular, they talk at the value of smaller housing developments in discrete locations, because again, not everybody wants to live on large housing estates as well, so it does serve a different purpose. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to identify viable areas of housing, areas of land in those valley communities where we can release for housing sites. So that's what we're trying to do. The other thing that we want to do, and hopefully can do with, if we are successful with levelling up funding, is we're putting in a bid to look at the level crossing in Pen Code, and to remove the level crossing and replace it with a pedestrian bridge and put in a brand new Penprisk road bridge. We are going to be applying for between 17 and 18 million pounds to the Levelling Up Fund to do that enormous piece of infrastructure in Pen Code. Now, what that will do is not just improve public transport and traffic congestion in that town centre, the frequency of people being able to cross back and forth over the railway line, but it will also release sites north of that Pen Code junction. Level crossing, so we'll be able to look at housing sites in that location now once that work is done. So there are plans afoot. I hope that answers some of your questions. It isn't that we're not doing strategic housing sites. We have to look at a different solution for these communities, and we will continue to work tirelessly to do that. So thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Janine. And as the question originally was the leader, so I don't know if the leader would like to comment any further before I go to supplementary questions. People are indicating to speak, but I've said I'll say at what point to please indicate to speak. Leader?
I'll just, I think Janine, as the Corporate Director for Communities, has made most of the points. I'm very pleased with the progress we're making at Iwenny Road in my stake, but it's of note that, of course, the Llynfi Valley is by far the biggest and widest of the valleys. One of the real disadvantages we're at is that both the Garw and the Ogmore Valley are narrower valleys. They have a landscape that's dominated by mountains and hills. There are obviously real practical problems with developing on mountains and hillsides, but we are looking to bring forward as many sites as we possibly can, particularly brownfield sites like Iwenny Road, but there are other sites, small scale sites, and we're doing extra work on that as we speak and looking to bring them forward. And if there are any proposals from members about sites, and I know certainly colleagues in the Garw and the Llynfi and the Ogmore have all put forward sites, and they are being considered, then we'd be more than happy to look at them. And that was part of the LDP process as well, was a call for submission of sites, and we did see some of those coming forward, but we'll be looking to consider more in the future if we can. And of course, we've welcomed the additional funding, social housing grant funding that's been made available by Welsh Government. But one of the other difficulties we do have is just around the cost of developing in some of our valleys communities, because of the likelihood, and there's a much greater likelihood of them either being brownfield sites or having very difficult conditions because of the topography and geography. And where that is the case, then, and this is the position with the Wenny Road, we will need to seek additional funding to make those developments viable, and that continues to be a real challenge for us across large swathes of the north of the county borough, particularly the upper parts of the valleys.
Thank you, Leader.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Baldwin, as Cabinet Member, do you have anything to add? Notice your hand is raised.
I do, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor. And obviously, how we are looking at housing as a whole system housing approach as well. So we will continue to look to see what we can do to tackle empty properties. But we must not forget that housing is a supply and demand issue. So the council will carry out various local housing market assessments to determine where the greatest need for housing is. So that is all taken into consideration. And I think the word the leader was looking for is contamination in relation to our brownfield sites, which is often greater in some of our mining areas. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Laura Griffith's hand is raised. Yeah. Or was that an old hand? No.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's an old hand.
This system is giving me a test today. Right, it's gone now. Right, so we now have two supplementary questions. So if members can indicate, and then we shall take questions. First one, Councillor Tim Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Mayor, I should say. Beg your pardon. Janine's addressed two major infrastructure projects there that are blocking capacity, namely the Penprisk Bridge and the lack of capacity on Junction 36. But I think within the Valley's Gateway area, there are smaller blockages. And I'm very concerned that over the years, there's been overdevelopment that hasn't addressed some of these capacity issues. So I'm thinking particularly the River Bridge on Abergaru Road, which would cost millions to sort out now, and the A4061. Does the Cabinet Member have any recommendations how these blockages could be, these infrastructure blockages could be retrospectively improved now that development has commenced? Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Right, Councillor White, David White, your camera is on. Councillor David White, right, okay, he's leaving. Any response from Leader, Cabinet on that supplementary question?
Would you like me to answer that question, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I'll wait for Councillor White to disappear as well. He keeps reappearing on my screen, but right, he's gone. Councillor David White. Janine?
Councillor Baldwin, would you like me to defer to you?
No, I was going to defer to you, Janine, but one thing I would say is that this will be quite an extensive answer that would be required on this. If Councillor Tim Thomas is willing and he would like to email me that question, I'll make sure he gets a full response that can be distributed to all councillors, if that's okay.
I think that would be an excellent suggestion, or it is an excellent suggestion if that could be done. So
as long as Councillor Tim Thomas is happy with that.
Councillor Thomas, you happy with that?
It seemed like Janine was ready in the waiting to give a response, so I wouldn't want to deprive her of the opportunity.
Well, if Janine can give a very brief response, but
if she can't, I'm happy to go down Councillor Baldwin's route. But she looks chomping at the bit to go for it. So
indeed, I think I was going to suggest just the same, actually, Councillor Thomas, because this is all part of strategic transport planning, and we've got we've got all that wrapped up within our LDP. It's an incredibly complicated piece of work, actually, because you have to look at the flows regionally and sub-regionally when you look at particular areas. And again, the other thing that's very important is the funding and the investment in the infrastructure and the priority order in which we spend the monies that we're afforded. So if you don't mind, I think the best way to tackle this question would be to take it offline, have a detailed written response with you that will reflect the most accurate position.
Fair enough, we'll do that. Thanks both.
And then I'll make sure that that is done as a member briefing for all councillors then. Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Great. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin.
Next one is Councillor John Paul Blundell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll lower my hand so I can say it has definitely lowered.
Definitely
You asked me to come back in. My question, and I'm sure Councillor Altaf Hussain will be very will want to listen closely to this answer. What part do the Welsh Government play in the process of how we set our LDP?
You're asking me.
A question about the question.
No, I don't know really, because I'm not in the government. I know they are always talking to leader. And in that, you can see, I don't have an active route in my Pwlb. We are contained there. We can't walk, we can't cycle. And for the last 11 years, I had been asking for a walking route there. That has not been happening. Was it because I'm not a labor or something? I don't know. But I tell you that in here, we don't have a conservative government. It is the Labour government. They don't talk to me about it. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, before you start, I need a point of order here. Members cannot.
Sorry, Councillor Granville.
That needs to be dealt with, Mr. Mayor. You can't say that in a public forum when that's not correct.
Sorry,
no, it is the perception. I'm sorry if you have felt like that. I'm sorry.
Online.
Okay.
Councillor Granville, if you want to make a point of order, you need to refer the point of order.
All right, sir.
Councillor Hussain, you've had your piece. You say we have two supplementary questions. The leader, I'm not sure if the leader wanted to add. I think we've had two supplementary questions. There's others have indicated. Leader, was you coming back on the answer to the question? Because
yeah, well, first of all, I do think it's important that the point that Councillor Hussain made is addressed. There was a Labour representative of Pwlb for 4 years previous to Councillor Hussain, and the same requests were made at that time. So I don't think it's anything to do with the colour of the rosette of the person representing Pwlb. It is because of long-standing, complicated land ownership issues in the first case, and the need to identify significant funding to develop, for example, an active travel route between Pwlb and Kevin Glass. And I think Councillor Hussain was referring to that in his remarks. And of course, our local development plan is made and is being made very much within the context and guided by a national policy framework that is set by the Welsh Government and the National Parliament for Wales, the Senedd. And of course, we will make decisions about the plan, the next plan, collectively as one council, because the local development plan is set by full council, and every one of the members here today, apart from, I think, to be fair to Councillor Mary Hughes, because she's a new member, but all the other members have indeed been part of the process of the start of this local development plan and have agreed to the way that we've reached the stage that we've reached in terms of the local development plan, including the way that major housing will be sited across the borough north and south of the M4, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. And other people have indicated with two supplementary questions. Right or wrong, though, I would like it would be nice to hear from a member who lives in the valleys. We have Councillor Shaw's indicated. So I beg your indulgence. We'll go one more and hear from a member who actually lives in the valleys.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I do appreciate it, and I'd just like to put a bit of perspective in, if I may. I do appreciate Councillor Hussein's original question on what is well known as a passion of mine, housing condition in the valleys. The issue, I think, may fall to resourcing. That the leader's quite right. You couldn't build a 400 house site in the Garw, as an example, because there just isn't the room to be able to do that. And if there is a site that accommodates that number of houses, quite rightly, the county will put resources internally onto that project. What that does, though, is to increase the distinction between the areas so that resources are never put to the many small plots that are available for development in valleys. So my question would be to Janine, I suppose, as director, or Stuart as our member on the cabinet. How can we address this imbalance in resourcing that could free up many of the available sites in the valleys?
Janine, I'm not sure if there's a relatively straightforward, or is that one that needs a fuller answer? Over to you, Janine.
I think I might be able to answer this. I'm not sure there is an imbalance in resourcing, if I'm honest with you, Councillor Shaw, because what we have at the moment is we don't have large sites in the valleys that have come forward. What we are doing instead in the valleys is we are looking in the two smaller valleys. We are looking at infill plots, or plots where we can have smaller parts of housing as part of our placemaking agenda. So we are definitely working on that, and that's an important part of our LDP to meet housing need. And we're also, as part of the consultation, have invited people to come forward if they have candidate sites or plots that they feel they'd like to build on. And it isn't just local residents or businesses or developers, it's the RSLs as well, because we have to remember we have to look at the full range of housing when we discuss housing needs. So I don't know whether that's actually given you any reassurances. At the moment, in the Llinvi Valley, we are concentrating, of course, on the Awenny Road site, because that is available. And our regeneration team are working on that with Welsh Government for the Housing Viability Fund. But elsewhere, in the higher parts of the Llinvi Valley and elsewhere in Garw and Ogmore, what we're looking at is the placemaking agenda, the small infill plots, and finding ways to encourage new housing, but in a more innovative way, rather than your Wimpeys and your Barretts of this world coming in and doing mass housing. Looking at, are there other ways that we can encourage new house building in those locations?
Thank you, Janine.
Can I just come back, John? Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if that's just a brief comment, that's all. For 4.5 years, I've been asking for many of the small plots actually owned by BCBC to be released for developers, and I've always been told there's not the resources to devote for it. So I welcome the LDP, and I may not be around when some of these sites actually get developed, but if any of them do, I'll have a hearty cheer and thank the county. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. Right, I think we've well and truly covered that question. There's some detailed answers we provided separately, which all members will receive. I now consider that item to be complete. I still got hands showing people speak, but I don't know if they're hands because of my system or. But we now move on to, well, the question is, we've been 2 hours in a meeting. I'm happy to continue to the next item, which is the quarterly debate, unless members shout accordingly that they'd like a 10-minute break. I hear nothing. Happy to carry on. Right, it's all quiet. So we move on to item 13 then, which is the quarterly debate. How will social care be funded post the COVID pandemic? I think our leader, Councillor David, is going to start us off with this. Over to you, leader.
Yeah, I will. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. COVID-19 has highlighted just how essential social care is in supporting people to be as independent as possible. The issues facing social care, particularly the increase in demand, scale of funding pressures and workforce challenges, are just as pressing now as they were before COVID, with many having been exacerbated by the pandemic. Increasing need for service is clearly evident in this phase of the pandemic. As was reported to Cabinet yesterday, we are providing 8% more domiciliary care than at this time last year. This is as a result of delays in people accessing NHS treatment due to the pandemic. The deconditioning is a consequence of lockdowns and shielding and the impact of long COVID. There's therefore a need for much greater funding to support a much greater level of social care over the next 5 years. Let's not forget that at its centre, social care is first and foremost about human relationships and supporting the care and support needs of individuals and their families, including older people, those that are vulnerable and those with complex needs, to improve their quality of life. An important feature of discussions about the future of social care should be around improving the quality of care and achieving outcomes for the individual, based on that important principle of what matters to them. This starts at the local level and should build on the strength of local authorities in their role in place and community, addressing the needs of individuals and families, building resilience and focusing on well-being. Health and social care are equally important and are often interdependent in terms of ensuring flow through the health and social care system. Decisions and prioritisations about the future of each service should reflect that and the need to plan and work together, embedding far more preventative approaches to well-being that work closely with public health and housing. Councils are best placed to convene partnerships locally to bring these services together in a locally focused and democratically led way. When considering the future of social care and support, addressing the most urgent priorities should be the starting point. And these include the provision of long-term sustainable funding that is sufficient to meet the predictable, and they are predictable, additional demands on social care driven by demographic and other pressures, including, of course, a rapidly aging population. Additional funding is also needed, though, to tackle unmet need. There is a need to place greater value on an approach to social care which is person-centred and recognises the desire of people to continue to live in their communities and mainly in their homes with meaning and purpose. Improving outcomes for children. There remain significant challenges in providing the right placements for children in care, particularly for those with the most complex needs. Locally, the past 18 months has also put many children and families under immense pressure and strain, with concerns about increased exposure to hidden harms, as well as lost learning and the impact of social distancing on children and young people's development and on their mental and emotional health and well-being too. Value and invest in the social care workforce is also urgent. Realising the need of parity of esteem with NHS workers, including ensuring the workforce is appropriately rewarded, fairly rewarded for the invaluable work they do, and have a pathway to career progression within a professionalised care sector. Of health and social care, where social care is at last seen as an equal partner to the NHS. This requires trusting and empowering local government to deliver and meet the needs of local communities and accelerating the move away from health systems centred around hospitals, important as they are, to ones where health and social care systems focus on place-based communities, primary and community services and well-being, addressing people's physical health, mental health and social needs together. When looking at the future of care and support, the Welsh Government also need to actively promote the principle of subsidiarity as a necessary underpinning feature of effective health, care and well-being, and consider how this can be most effectively reinforced as part of the system. The inadequacy of the current funding model for social care is now well known, and there is a real need to invest time and resources to bring coherence and to design a system which is able to effectively meet both the demands which social care will face in the future. A long-term, sustainable solution to the way social care is funded is essential if we are to deliver the system as organised around the individual and their family, which meets their needs and promotes their well-being with safe and high-quality services. Given the immediacy of the severe economic challenge facing Wales and its communities, councils have previously called for an ambitious programme of investment in several capital programmes which could help rebuild Wales's community and economy. There remains a need to invest in our social care infrastructure. This is essential to help bring buildings up to modern standards. Extra care facilities have also been developed by a number of local authorities, including here in Bridgend, very successfully in Maesteg, at Ty Llonderw, at Ty Ynisawdra and at Llyston in Kenfig. We believe there's scope for further investment in these if capital and revenue were made available at a national level. The 21st Century School Initiative provides a model that could be used to support a jointly devised programme of work of long-term investment in the improvement and development of our social care infrastructure. Local government has been broadly supportive of the commitments made in the programme for government, Welsh Government programme for government, I should add, that relates to social care and is committed to working with the government to achieve these ambitions. This includes the need to find a sustainable funding solution that enables us to meet our long-term care needs, something that local government has long been calling for. UK government's announcement on the 7th of September, which set out their plans for healthcare, adult social care and their funding plan, will result in Wales benefiting from around 700 million from the additional funding raised. This additional funding provides the prospect of a significant opportunity for Wales to reform the local social care system and help tackle the urgent priorities set out. Increased investment brings opportunities to develop sustainable long-term solutions. Local government, through the Welsh Local Government Association, continues to meet with and discuss the need for long-term and sustainable funding with ministers on a regular basis to help shape Welsh Government's thinking on how the additional funding could be used, reflecting local government's ambition and priorities for the future. In addition, as the Welsh Local Government Association spokesperson for Health and Social Care, continue to meet with the Minister for Health and Social Services to highlight the increasing concerns about the current pressures being experienced in social care and seeking discussions on potential actions that could be taken at a national level now to help tackle and address the challenges that have been experienced now across the country. As part of this, we believe there is a need to develop a balanced approach that does not give one part of the system primacy over the other in dealing with the pressures facing social care and health in the short and long term, with health and social care being treated with parity in the budget decisions and considerations, recognising that health and social care are equal partners in the aspiration of delivering one seamless health and social care system for Wales, organised around the individual and their family. Local government does not want to be in a position where we compete with health for investment in local services that address the health, social care and well-being needs of our citizens. We are partners working together to deliver services. Although we all know that we could and should do more to ensure there are seamless services from the citizens' point of view. but it must be recognised and addressed that social care services that local authorities and our partners provide are not valued or understood by the public, sadly, in the same way that the citizen views the NHS. This is reflected in the fact that the public understand the need for further investment in health, but do not call for the same investment in social care. We must continue to raise awareness amongst the public about the value of social care and its impact on people's well-being and independence. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader, for starting off that debate. And now we've got some people indicating to add to the debate. Councillor Ross Pennell-Thomas first.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the Leader as well for opening the debate. I'll try to make my contribution as brief as possible, but much of which the Council Leader I agree with, actually. The topic of today's debate is almost like Mystic Meg stuff, really, but it is arguably the question of our time. Every local authority and most providers have changed their recruitment practices. Actually, in a previous work life, I worked on a pitch to Social Care Wales just a couple of years back, which was all about promoting roles in social care, how rewarding it is, the relationships you build, the staple feature that you can become in making a difference to people's everyday lives. But in spite of all of that, we are facing the biggest recruitment and retention crisis in living memory, as well as a chronic underfunding shortage. Let's be blunt, social care in this country has been underfunded for decades, and the chickens are coming home to roost, with an increasingly ageing population, as the Leader has already mentioned, and significant numbers of people living longer with health needs. I'd certainly like to think that it's a concept no politician could disagree with. A fair day's wage for a fair day's work, and in too many situations that simply isn't the case among our workforce. We've lauded social care colleagues in the past 18 months, standing at our doorsteps, clapping and labelling them as heroes, but their wages reflect differently. While there are many ethically responsible third sector and private providers, there are still some where contractual obligations are less than favourable. For example, employees having to pay for their own uniform or the real living wage not being paid. We know, and I'm pretty sure everybody across the chamber would agree, pay needs improving, terms and conditions need improving, funding of the system needs improving. And it probably won't come as any surprise that successive UK governments have since 1996 commissioned 7 policy papers, 5 consultations and 4 independent reviews into social care. That means that successive UK governments have also kicked those recommendations into the long grass, and as the Leader has already mentioned, not grasped the nettle in ensuring that there's a unified health and social care system in the UK where nobody falls between the gaps. There's a case here, I think, Mr. Mayor, to look at economies of scale. The Leader mentioned that councils are best placed to provide care, and while I don't disagree with the principle of that, I wonder if there is a halfway house whereby packages can be devised and delivered locally, but perhaps overseen more on a regional basis. I absolutely understand that bigger isn't always better in service delivery and outcomes, but I do think it needs analysis on a similar basis to Wales's economic footprint with regional deals. I'd also challenge, and I'll end on this, Mr. Mayor, the UK and Welsh governments to look internationally and learn from others, in particular our neighbours in Scandinavia. They properly recognise and fund their social care and health system, in this case by up to twice as much as the UK currently does. And therein lies part of the reason that our Scandinavian friends enjoy the best quality of life in the world. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Thomas. And Councillor Alex Williams next.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll make a brief contribution, if I may. I don't pretend to be an expert in social care at all, so don't have all the answers to this question or the sustainable long-term solutions about which the Leader referred. But first of all, perhaps it would be pertinent to pay tribute to the dedication and extraordinary efforts of all the staff working in the social care sector during the pandemic. Mr. Mayor, while the subject of the debate is on how social care will be funded in the future, the pandemic has undoubtedly demonstrated the fragility of the social care system as a whole, and I think COVID-19 should be a catalyst for this change. The Welsh Government says itself that future funding will be challenging, and that even if annual spending increases by some 6% per annum, as it did between 2017 and 2019, which was before the pandemic hit us, it is unlikely to meet the cost of increasing demand for social care. So indeed, if demand continues to increase as expected, at the same time as financial and workforce pressures increase, as my two previous colleagues have said, the need for a solution to this problem will be greater than ever. So in recent years, we know that the Welsh Government has focused on joining up health and social care and preventing problems occurring or getting worse in the first place. So I believe that with an ageing population which could see demand surge for social care, further funding on preventative measures will be crucial for us as a local authority. I believe Audit Wales has just released a report on adult social care, which found that some councils had increased their preventative services and started shifting provision from social care into preventative and community-based provision. But they found a wide variation across Wales, particularly as making this shift requires councils to have enough preventative services in the first place. So I suppose I'd like to pose a question back at the leader, the cabinet member, and the corporate director, because I'd be genuinely interested on how well we perform as a local authority in this area of preventative and community-based provision, which ultimately, I suppose in the long term, will alleviate the pressure on our social services. And I'd like to ask how they think funding can be diverted in the future to fund these additional preventative measures while continuing to be responsive to residents' immediate social care needs. I appreciate that this may very well be a task which is almost impossible to achieve. That's all I'd like to say, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. And as just remind you, this is a debate, so not so much questions, but it's a debate to ask questions, but pose where we go in the future. I know it's Claire Marchant. Claire, could you come on next, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm Claire Marchant, Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing, and your Statutory Officer for Social Services for the Council. And obviously this is a council debate and primarily a political debate. And as I think has already been said, the funding of social care is one of the big political issues and one of the big political decisions of our time. But as your statutory officer, one of the duties I have is to advise you as council of the resources needed to meet our statutory duties in respect of safeguarding, care and support and well-being. And I think just to go to Councillor Williams's point there, we do have statutory duties in terms of well-being and have made significant progress, I think, in Bridgend in terms of those well-being objectives, both as a council through some award-winning and exemplar schemes that we have taken forward in partnership, such as our Super Ages scheme, which has been recognised by the Bevan Foundation as one of the exemplars across Wales, and very much in partnership with our third sector partners in Barvo as well. Clearly more to do, and clearly that business case and shift to preventative services has never been more important. I would advise council professionally, though, and the point has been made by a number of speakers already, that the need to invest in social care, as well as that investment in preventative services, is acute and exacerbated by the challenges of the pandemic. As has already been said, the needs that we were already grappling with as a consequence of an ageing population and increasing complexity of need of people with disabilities, as well as people who are getting older and have the conditions and need for social care that come with greater age, which is a good news story, has been exacerbated by the impact of long COVID, the delays in people accessing NHS and other treatments, and the impact of long periods of shielding and deconditioning as a consequence of the lockdown. So we're seeing that increase in need and demand. And so I think a twin track, and my advice is a twin track approach in terms of both investment in preventative services and investment in social care is needed over the short, medium and longer term. And I think that in terms of where that investment should be targeted, my advice to you as council, and it does accord very much with some of the views I've heard expressed already, but my professional advice is that the need to address the issues in terms of social care workforce are acute. There are challenges across the whole economy in terms of retention and recruitment at the moment, and that is particularly the case in social care. So professionally, the need to develop the career pathways, terms and conditions, and pay and grading structures are points that ADSS Cymru, of which I'm a member as a Director of Social Services, have been making in our submissions and our professional conversations with Welsh Government officials and in partnership with the Welsh Local Government Association as well. So I think there is now a real opportunity. It's a positive consequence of the pandemic that social care is being spoken of far more, that it does have a priority, and the understanding of the importance of social care, I think, is far greater than it has been in years prior to. And there is an opportunity for those in governments at all levels to consider how the investment will come across into social care. But my strong professional advice would be that focus on workforce as the underpinning, and the underpinning in terms of quality of care and outcomes for people. So thank you very much for the opportunity to input professionally.
Thank you, Claire, for that. Thank you. Leader, Councillor David, would you like to respond to some of the...
Yeah, if I could, please, Chair. So in response to Councillor Pennell Thomas's proposal that we consider, or suggestion, I should say, that we consider more regional solutions to some of these problems. I'm very pleased to confirm that at a regional level in the Cwm Taf region, we're now working very effectively with Cwm Taf University Health Board, with Rhondda Cynon Taf and Merthyr councils and the third sector. And indeed, we are commissioning a number of different services at that level and making very effective use of the Welsh Government funding that's been made available through ICF and funding for transforming social care and building a healthier Wales. We've also made strides locally around terms and conditions. So there's a very real commitment that we're now working through with our commissioned partners to deliver the real living wage for all staff in social care. As we recommission services, we are ensuring that that becomes the minimum offer. But what we've also found, unfortunately, is even when people are offered the terms and conditions of direct employment by the authority, there is simply not the level of interest in working in social care that there used to be before. That in part reflects, I think, the rapidly changing labour market, where we are seeing different sectors. We've seen it in the transport sector, HGV drivers, we've seen in the hospitality sector, where the private sector are rapidly increasing some terms and conditions, and there is now significant labour shortages across the economy. And of course, we are in a competitive environment trying to attract and retain our workforce. And then finally, just on the points that have been made about funding, they're very important points that have been made about funding. I do think there is a genuine and real opportunity, an opportunity that we haven't had in possibly a generation. Now, with the £800 million worth of funding, new funding that will be coming to Wales, that is good news. But that funding needs to be as focused on the social care system as it will be focused on the NHS. As I said in my contribution, we've talked for a long time in Wales about equality, about parity between health and social care. That requires action, and that requires equality of investment and funding. So there's a perfect opportunity now for Welsh Government to show that commitment by making sure that that funding comes to social care, because we need that funding and we need it now, and we need to invest that funding not just in social care but also in some of those preventative services that Councillor Williams and Councillor Pennell-Thomas referenced. And we heard the director talk about the super ages scheme. We have a hugely successful community coordinator and navigator scheme where people who previously would have ended up dependent on statutory social care are now being effectively supported in their own communities. And that's an evidenced successful scheme that we are currently scaling up, and we will want to scale it up at a faster pace and make sure it's universal provision right across the borough that's available to any individual or family that we think will benefit from that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. We've got approximately 5 minutes left. We've got 2 further councillors to contribute, and then that will be the end of this debate. So we've got Councillor Jane Gebbie, then Councillor Pam Davies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I will put my hand down now. I'm not going to put my camera on because my internet is very sketchy this afternoon. Okay. Oh, no, my hand won't go down. So I'm very sorry. Very briefly, Chair, I wouldn't dispute many of the points made by fellow members here today, but what I am conscious of is that Welsh Government have endeavoured to reward our health and social care staff here in Wales. I'm a local government worker elsewhere, and we see care providers making it an easy profit at public money's expense because they refuse all the complex package of care requirements that are needed, or those that are further off into our hills and mountains, shall we say. But I would also just like to raise a couple of other points. We talked about disparities of pay and terms and conditions between health and social care. Health staff are currently being consulted with on their pay claim. Their pay claim is now, they've been offered 4%, but already our NHS staff get 41 days of holidays each year under their terms and conditions. And it's called the Agenda for Change, and it's a devolved agenda for obvious reasons. Local government staff are paid under the Green Book, and I'll declare an interest here because I sit on the NJC committee. We have just received our employer's notification to tell us that they will not be negotiating any further. And yet again, local government staff, those that have been around for more than 5 years or are not at the bottom of their scale, will receive 1.75%. That is really, really unacceptable. So it really shouldn't matter what colour flag you sit under. We should all be supporting our local government workers. They are all our staff, and we need to support them to ensure that they get a decent pay rise. Because I'm really sorry, unless you've received a pay rise this year of 5.6%, you've received a pay cut. And our staff, particularly those care staff that we keep talking about in this debate today, cannot afford to heat their own houses. And they're all in the main on part-time, and they're all females. So I'm really sorry. We need to do something. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gebbie. Well said. Councillor Pam Davies next, and the last one then.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with the sentiments that Jane has already said. At the end of the day, what can you say? I've got less than 5 minutes to speak. I could speak on this until midnight. You need a huge big plaster to repair everything that has gone on in the years past. There's a lot that's going on in the NHS which could give savings, which could be sideways move to care staff. We are never ever going to get, we've got the quality there. We've got to maintain the quality of staff, not the numbers, although we do need the numbers at present. It's not a very nice job. Let's be fair. No one wants to wipe somebody's backside. No one wants to pick their vomit up. And worse, hemorrhaging, etc. They have to deal with all that on a day-to-day basis. They are working massive overtime because they're short-staffed, their sickness levels goes up, and who can blame them with the job that they've got to do? Subsequent, as Jane said, Agenda for Change, I can remember when Gender for Change came in with the nurses in early 2000s, and some of the NAs then that were NAs had a less, somebody said to me, I've got a worse grading than a chicken in Sainsbury's, because they've taken the menial jobs that nurses wouldn't do off them. It needs a rocks up, but it also needs people that are doing the job on those negotiating committees, because they need to go back to grassroots. You can throw whatever thousands of money you need at this, but you need to get at the root of the problem. And it's no good throwing money after money. How many reviews have we had on the NHS and social care? We need to get at the root of the problem. And the only way to do that is to get it from staff that are at that cliff edge, down like the pits. They are at the cliff edge and they know exactly what's going on. There's a multitude of things you could go on. The whole thing is wrong. For example, when you have medical reps going into doctors' surgeries trying to bribe the doctors, have a free stethoscope, have £500 for putting patients on a drug and trialing them. They're giving money to doctors when they actually qualify for a booze up. That money could be sideways moved. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, but that's the actual reality that we're playing with, and that money could be going on patients and social care.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. We have come to our 30 minutes now, and I mean, albeit the allegations, some of the things you're making, I mean, maybe that's not for you today. Thank you all for your contributions. We've had a good 30 minutes. It's not a simple answer, and it does come down to cash at the end of the day, but thank you everybody for your valid contributions, and let's hope the work can be done by Welsh Government to put things right eventually. So the next item is item 11, urgent items. Item 14, in accordance with Council Procedure Rules, not being notified of any urgent items. So that brings us to the end of the meeting. It's 17:31. My laptop is now going to go in the bin because it's been a pain today.